The classical virtue of moderation is not about saying no. It's about saying yes to the right things at the right time, in the right amount, for the right reasons. It's not about suppressing desires. It's about the right ordering of desires. And a man who has not done that work, who has not learned to govern his own appetites in service of what he most deeply wants, is not a free man. Moderation is the cardinal virtue that almost nobody wants to talk about, sometimes including me. Courage is heroic, prudence is sophisticated, justice is righteous. Moderation sounds like the virtue your grandmother wanted you to practice. Moderation sounds like prudery. Moderation sounds like the joyless management of appetite, saying no to the second slice of pie, going to bed at a reasonable hour, drinking responsibly, exercising in measured amounts. The virtue of the square, the bore, and the loser. The virtue of the man whose life is small. That's the modern caricature, and it's done so much damage to the actual virtue that by the time most men hear the word, they've already decided to check out. So let me say this at the very top, and then we'll do the patient work of unpacking it. The classical virtue of moderation is not about saying no. It's about saying yes to the right things at the right time, in the right amount, for the right reasons. It's not about suppressing desires. It's about the right ordering of desires. And a man who has not done that work, who has not learned to govern his own appetites in service of what he most deeply wants, is not a free man. He is, in the precise sense, a slave to whatever pulls hardest on him in any given moment. That's why I prefer to call moderation self-control, and that's the subject of this episode. The Greek word here is sophrosyne, literally something like sound-mindedness or wholeness of mind. The Latin equivalent is temperantia, from which we get the English word temperance, a word that, thanks to the 19th century temperance movement, now sounds like the virtue of avoiding alcohol. That is not what temperantia means in the classical sources. Temperantia, like sophrosyne, refers to proper tempering, the right ordering of a man's desires in relation to what is actually good for him. Aristotle, in the Nicomachean Ethics, treats self-control primarily under the heading of the bodily appetites, the desires for food, for drink, and for sex. But he's very careful to make a distinction that almost every modern treatment of this subject misses. Aristotle distinguishes the moderate man, the sophron, from two others. He distinguishes him from the intemperate man, the one whose appetites are out of control. That much we expect. But he also distinguishes him from the merely continent man, the inkrates, the man who controls his appetites, but only by the exertion of constant power. The continent man, Aristotle says, is not the virtuous man. He is a man who is still at war with himself. His appetites are still pulling in the wrong direction. He's just managing to override them. The moderate man, the sophron, is different. His appetites themselves have been formed over time so that they pull in the right direction. He doesn't white knuckle his way into saying no to the second drink because the second drink no longer appeals to him the way it once did. He doesn't suffer through clean eating. He's come actually to prefer clean eating. You see, he hasn't suppressed his desires. He's channeled them. They're now allies, not enemies. And that's the goal of the work. Not a life of constant control, but rather a life in which restraint is no longer needed because desire itself has been brought into alignment with what's genuinely good. Now, there's a Greek word for desire I want to introduce here because it's going to come back when we get to the lover episode. That word is orexis. It's sometimes translated as desire, sometimes as appetite, inclination, or longing. It refers to the orientation of the soul towards something, the pull, the reach, the want. And orexis, in the classical anthropology, is not a problem. It is a feature of being human. The man with no desires isn't a saint. He's a stone. The work of moderation or self-control is not to suppress orexis. The work of moderation is the right ordering of desire. What classical writers, Plato, Aristotle, the Christian fathers, meant by virtue in this domain is that the lower appetites should be subordinate to the higher appetite, the immediate to the long range, the trivial to what's genuinely important. Desire isn't extinguished, no, it's subordinated, channeled, and aimed. This is why I prefer to use the phrase self-control rather than discipline, rather than even the word moderation itself, which has been so badly battered. The mature man does not have fewer desires than other men. He often has more. And more often they're bigger and more vivid, and they may often reach further. What distinguishes him is that his desires are aimed at the right things, and that his lesser desires have learned to wait their turn. There are three counterfeits to clear away, because they have all been called moderation at one time or another, and none of them is. First, moderation is not prudery. Prudery is the suspicion of pleasure as such. It's the suspicion of the body. It's the suspicion of food, of drink, of beauty, of sex, of laughter, of the goodness of created things. Prudery looks like moderation to the untrained eye because it produces the same outward behaviors. Eating less, drinking less, abstaining from various pleasures. But its inner motive is entirely different. Prudery says, that thing is suspect, and the safest thing I can do is to keep it at arm's length. The classical and the Christian tradition has never said that. The classical and Christian tradition says, the thing itself is good, and the work is to use it rightly. As St. Maximus the Confessor puts it, it's not food that's evil, but gluttony. Not the begetting of children, but unchastity. Not material things, but greed. Not esteem, but self-esteem. This being so, it is only the misuse of things that is evil. So, food's good, eat it with gratitude, in proper measure. Wine is good, drink it with gratitude, in proper measure. The body is good, pleasures are good. The work is in ordering them well, not in being suspicious of them. Number two, moderation is not deprivation, as if deprivation were a virtue in itself. There's a strain in contemporary masculine self-development that has confused suffering with strength. The cold plunge as a moral act. The fasting or diet protocol that gets turned into an identity. Bragging about how little sleep you need. Some of this, in moderation, pun intended, is useful. Discipline matters, absolutely. Voluntary discomfort has its place, for sure. But when deprivation becomes the point, when the man is no longer asking, what is this for, and is instead asking, how much can I endure for its own sake, he slipped into completely different territory. He is, in classical terms, indulging in self-imposed suffering as a form of pride. He's not practicing self-control. He's actually practicing a kind of vanity. Third point, moderation is not the joyless management of appetite. The man who has integrated this virtue is not the grim man at the dinner table, refusing the dessert with a sad and disciplined expression. He's the man who, by the time dessert arrives, has had just enough of the meal that dessert is genuinely an option, and he can take it or leave it without drama. Pay attention to this. The virtue is in the freedom, not in the refusal. The mature man is the man whose relationship to his appetites is that they are lightly held, governed, and not anxious. He's not white-knuckling his way through anything. He's done the work, and the work has produced a freedom around the table and around every other arena of his life that the less formed man simply does not have. So, how is this virtue formed? Same Aristotelian answer as for every other virtue. By repeatedly acting with self-control. You don't become moderate by deciding to be moderate. You become self-controlled by controlling yourself over and over until your appetites themselves have been shaped by the practice. But there's a particular shape to the formation of self-control that distinguishes it from the formation of courage and prudence. Courage is formed by acting in the face of fear. Prudence is formed by acting, reflecting, and being counseled. Self-control is formed by something more specific, by subordinating lesser goods to a greater good over and over again while holding the greater good clearly in view. Let me unpack that because it's the heart of how this virtue is actually built. The immoderate man, the man who lacks self-control, classically is not the man who pursues bad things. He's the man who pursues good things, but in the wrong order. Food's a good thing. Drink's a good thing. Sex within the right relationship is a good thing. Comfort, rest, pleasure, all good things. The immoderate man's problem is not that he wants these things, it's that he wants them now, right now, more than he wants the greater goods they would compromise. He wants the second drink more than he wants tomorrow's clarity. He wants the third helping more than he wants the physique he's been training for 2 years. He wants the one-night fling more than he wants the eventual marriage. Self-control is formed then by repeatedly choosing the greater good, with the greater good held clearly and vividly in view over the lesser good that is more immediately available. And the operative word in that sentence is vividly. You cannot subordinate a good you cannot see. The man who's trying to moderate his eating without a vivid vision of his larger goal, the physique he wants, the health he wants, the man he's becoming, that man is fighting blind. His appetite has a vivid object, his restraint has none, and the appetite will win every time. This is why, incidentally, the moralistic approach to self-control fails so miserably. The man who is simply told he shouldn't have the second drink because it's bad for him has nothing vivid to subordinate that desire to. He just has a prohibition. And prohibitions, in the absence of a vividly held greater good, almost never produce real virtue. They produce, at best, the suffering continent man that Aristotle described, the man at war with himself. And while I'm down here in the footnotes, this is why in my coaching practice, the first thing I help clients do is get a vivid personal vision of what they'd like their life to look like in 3 to 5 years. Because until you have that, you don't have a greater good to pursue that'll force you to change your present day habits and routines, that'll force you to create the new identity that can actually have that vision. As Proverbs says, without vision the people perish. And without a clear, vivid vision of a preferable future, very little self-development work is going to stick. Okay, back to the topic. The mature man's self-control is rooted in something he can see. The marriage he's building, the work he's doing, the body he's forging, the God he's serving, the man he's becoming. Each of these, held vividly, makes the lesser appetite small, not by suppressing it, but by giving himself something bigger to want. I think it was Tommy Aquinas who called it the expulsive power of a greater affection. That is, once you fall in love with something better, all the second best choices just lose their appeal. That's why a man obsessed with getting into great shape doesn't feel like he's depriving himself of anything if he spends his time in the gym and eats cleanly and avoids alcohol. Those things aren't even on his radar anymore. Now, as with prudence and the magician, moderation has a corresponding archetypal expression, though this is the place in the architecture where the connection takes the most patience to see clearly, because in our culture, the relevant archetype has been misnamed and misrepresented even more thoroughly than the magician has. Robert Moore calls him the lover. And I'm going to ask you to do the same thing I asked you to do with the magician episode. Bear with the name until I've had a chance to explain what is meant by it. Because the lover, in Moore's account, is not primarily about romance, and it's certainly not primarily about sex. The lover is the archetype of connection itself, the capacity to be genuinely moved by beauty, by another person, by a work of art or a piece of music, a sunset, or simply by the goodness of created things. The lover is the man who is genuinely present to his life rather than half checked out of it. The man capable of attention, of awe, of tenderness. The man whose desires reach for what's genuinely good and who can be reached in turn by what is genuinely beautiful. And the connection to self-control is exact because rightly ordered desire is what makes the lover possible. The man whose appetites have been chaotic and unformed is not actually capable of the kind of presence the lover requires. His attention is too scattered, his longing too misdirected. He can't be truly present to his wife because his desire is still pulled towards 7 other things, or he's distracted by sex. He can't really listen to a piece of music because he's scrolling his phone at the same time. He can't be moved by beauty because he has spent his desire so promiscuously across so many lesser objects that he's got nothing left for the genuinely beautiful thing when it does appear. Self-control is the discipline. The lover is what discipline produces when it has done its work. One practice for the week. Identify one appetite in your life that has been running you rather than serving you. Just one, not a list. The one that, if you're honest, is the most clearly out of order right now. The eating, the drinking, the screen time, the pornography, the spending, the work that has become its own kind of appetite, whatever it is, you know exactly what I'm talking about, don't you? And then do this. Don't try to suppress it directly. Don't make a vow. Don't announce a hard rule. Instead, write it down physically on paper in your own hand, the larger good that this lesser appetite is interfering with, specifically with names and details. Your marriage, your physique, your work, the relationship with your children, the man you're trying to become. Hold the image of that larger good vividly in your mind and then notice over the course of the week, every time that lesser appetite presents itself, what happens when you bring the greater good to mind first. That's the active ingredient. The vivid recollection of the greater good in the moment when the lesser desire raises its head. Sustained over time, that's how self-control is actually formed. Before the next episode, the sentence to finish. The appetite that has been running me, that I have been calling something else, is... The appetite that has been running me, that I have been calling something else, is... Calling it self-care or stress relief or a reward, the way you unwind, the thing you deserve. Strip off the rationalization. Name it clearly. Whatever it is, naming it accurately is the first move. The work can't begin while the rationalization is still keeping it at bay. Next episode, the lover. The archetype of connection, beauty, and the risk of being known. The man whose appetites have been rightly ordered, walking around in the world genuinely present to his life. And the bipolar shadow forms. The addicted lover and the impotent lover in Moore's terms and what they look like in real men. Don't miss it. Subscribe so you won't. And as always, kindly like this episode if you would please. Pass it on to another man who might benefit from it, and leave a comment below. I'll see you next week. The forge is open.